operationalization of the Act in terms of what virtual asset tokenization platforms need to do in order to comply and to be licensed. So it will basically provide the licensing procedure for VASPs that are operating in this space. In the US, the SEC guidance for January, I believe, 2026, it clarifies tokenized securities that remain subject to federal laws, and it treats them as securities. Global frameworks like the MiCA as well, and UAE and the Genius Act, that provide further clarity around this. And I've also provided for KYC and AML provisions, smart contract enforceability, and custodial services around tokenized assets for compliance. So the opportunities for businesses and investors for investing in tokenizable products is, like I said, tokenization democratizes access to assets as well as boosts the efficiencies. And this is done through fractional ownership. It allows for fractional ownership and lowers the entry barrier for some of these capital-intensive investments. For example, real estate, art, or gold, like I gave an example. Another key benefit is liquidity. Because all these transactions are happening on a blockchain, there's 24/7 trading going on. And so there'll be a lot of liquidity. It also provides for secondary markets, and there are faster settlement times. All this contributes to increasing liquidity. Also, there's the point of the fractional ownership. It enables illiquid assets such as real estate to be heavily liquid in terms of breaking them into smaller fractions and allowing a huge portfolio of people to invest. Projections from institutional players such as BlackRock, JP Morgan, they project that the tokenized real estate market could hit trillions by 2035, as well as the real world asset market. So the opportunity is definitely there. So I think I've given the attendees an overview of tokenization and what to expect in terms of from a legal and regulatory point of view.
And, okay, so there's a question, Robert.
Sure.
I've just received a question. When we look at the definition of tokenization and we talk about art, commodities, and all that, can we make this application to, let's say, a loan portfolio where we're now seeking liquidity from global markets, and we are able to tokenize this particular portfolio? Because the wording of the act seems to veer off to, traditional market products, bonds, I don't know what. Can this also be something that can be tokenized as well?
Yeah, for me, I believe anything can be tokenized so long as there's a use case and it's happening. For example, we are seeing warehouse receipts that can be tokenized, enabling farmers access loans. So that can be a good use case in terms of accessibility to loans. And in terms of also the act, being a lawyer and going back to my, the units for statutory interpretations of law and legal interpretation, the wording of the act, it provides for of the same kind. So this is generic kind. So I think that's something we can take in terms of it recognizes that the traditional assets, financial assets such as real estate, commodities, stocks, and bonds. But I think other things of the same kind could apply. Yeah, so long as there's a financial value and to be obtained, I think it's very possible for it. And knowing the Capital Markets Authority has the sandbox for piloting innovative products, that could definitely qualify. Yeah, for that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you as well. Kindly take us through a typical virtual asset tokenization process. Given the same is regulated by CME, once it's created, what happens? Is it listed or someone offers the fractional ownership as a private transaction?
Let's use real estate for example, a real estate project. So essentially, you transfer the project to a company, a special purpose vehicle, this being, let's call it Mudoninjogo and assets. Yeah. So we transferred it there. And then two would be now, now this is now tokenization, whereby you're converting the real world asset tokens into digital tokens or representation of digital tokens and transferring the ownership rights. So the shares in the company, in this case, would be represented by the digital tokens in a blockchain network. So there's something called tokenomics, whereby people would have to sit down and see how much the number of tokens that the value, basically do a valuation of the token. So you need a valuer in terms of okay, if the project is worth 2 billion Kenya shillings, how many tokens would be released and what would be the value of each token, or total would be 2 billion. Yeah. So once you have this, once you have the tokens, now you list them. Now listing is another process, because the whole point of tokenization is getting liquidity. So you want to list them in a liquid platform. For example, an exchange like Binance. So you'd have to go through Binance and list them on the product, on the platform. And once you do this, basically an exchange or a blockchain exchange. It could be Binance, it could be Bitget, or you could build yours, so long as you've onboarded the investors. But once you have this now, once you've listed them on an exchange, this is a crypto exchange, then now users will be able to swap or to buy. For example, if I want to buy 200 or 200,000 worth of the tokens, I'd fund my account and buy the equivalent of the token that should be sent to my wallet. And yeah, so that's essentially how the process is. And like I said, it is regulated by the CMA. So the point of the regulation by CMA is provision to the general public. The CMA is the umbrella body in charge of regulating securities in the country. And remember, if you are to use the Howey test, these tokens qualify as securities. So if you're going to sell them to the general public, then you must comply. You must be regulated by the Capital Markets Authority in the instance that your business thinks or such. So that's how the CMA comes in. So once it's created, once it's created, is it listed, or someone offers the fractional ownership as a private transaction? So you can do private placement as well, in terms of if you are, maybe let's say I have a real estate tokenization platform and I've only onboarded institutional players, I could do a private placement kind of transaction. So that would be a private transaction. So you could sell it to the general public or do a private placement kind of transaction. Yeah. So I hope I've answered.
Moving on, there is another question. What rights does a token holder of a real world asset have with regard to the real world asset? Example, real estate property. Have we removed the other laws that apply to it, so that when you're talking about rights, just because you've tokenized, do they still have rights?
So like I said, tokenization is just an evolution. I like to say tokenization is an evolution of a REIT, a real estate investment trust, thanks to technology. Yeah. And the same way in a trust, you just own, remember the investment is ownership in the special purpose vehicle, the shares. It's the shares in the special purpose vehicle that own the real estate project. So essentially you'd be buying into that company, not into the real estate project, but the company is what manages the project. Yeah. So in a real estate investment trust, it's either an I rate or a D rate. So you're either getting income generated from the property, that's rental income, or the development, whereby you get your money from sale of the units. You get, so this the same applies. For to buy a token, the token would be either rental income, a real estate token would be either rental income in the property or sale of the property. You don't really have the rights to charge the property or occupy or possess, because yeah, again, it's the shares of the company that were tokenized. So you are a shareholder of the company. So the company has a management that runs it and does all that. Yeah, so it's the investment in this case would be either rental income or sale of the property. So, but for gold, at least for it's also different with the asset class as well. For example, you can tokenize stocks, you can tokenize bonds, you can tokenize agricultural products. It's been done in Brazil. and you can tokenize gold. So at least for gold, I know a platform that you tokenize, that have tokenized gold, and they offer the option of redeeming your gold. So for example, you can redeem with as little as a milligram. So if you bought a milligram worth, you can have the milligram worth of gold sent to your address. Yeah. So I think those are the limits and the rights that come with ownership.
I think Wabuko may have wanted somebody to return back his property so that he can charge it. Another question, another question that I've also received. When we talk about tokenization, you gave various examples from an international perspective. We have seen some local companies that have tried to do that here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk about it so that it doesn't look as if it's such a global phenomena. As we wait for the law and the regulations, what has been happening in the local space so that it also brings a feel to the Kenyan space?
So what has been happening locally, there is Project Mocha, which is a platform that tokenizes coffee and puts coffee on the blockchain. This enables farmers access capital as well as liquidity for their products and crops. So I definitely advise attendees to Google Project Mocha. Let me just type them in. Another product is for real estate. There is Alpha Block. Alpha Block was, I believe, 2 years ago admitted to the Capital Markets Authority sandbox, and they're tokenizing real estate. They're also exploring to tokenize stocks and bonds, from what I understand, from what we read online. There's also the other platforms that actually tokenize real world assets. So those are the two that come to mind off the top. Let me try see if I can remember another one.
Yashara as well.
Yeah, Yashara tokens. Yeah, Yashara was the one I was looking for. So there's Yashara that are tokenizing real estate. There's also Melanin Capital, who are a climate fintech platform that are tokenizing carbon credits for green finance. Yeah, so those are the real world asset tokenizing platforms.
Okay, so I think Irene has another question. Maybe you can read it from your end as well and help us come to an answer.
So for a financial institution, can one use digital assets to securitize physical assets and receivables to unlock capital? And are the digital assets time bound? And are the digital assets time bound rather than being held indefinitely? Do you have any use cases? So for financial, can one use digital assets to securitize physical assets? So by that you mean using crypto or Bitcoin to get a loan against real estate product? I think she should give us an example of.
Irene, can you manage to unmute yourself if you can?
So you
just so
understand
that
the question.
Robert can get the question.
Oh, yes, I can. So let me use an example that happened in this market, but it was many years ago before NIC, the current NCBA became a bank. It was a credit asset financier. So what they did is they bought the asset finance book plus receivables from, I think, Barclays, those many years ago. And through that, then that's how they started their credit finance business. So in that case, it means the Barclays then was, they sold part of their loan book and gave it to this credit financier. So in this case, assume NIC was to go to that, was to use the same loan book and then seek investment from an investor. Can they securitize the physical asset? In this case, you're talking about machinery, vehicles, and the money that is due from the loans, or the assuming like now for leasing companies, the receivables that are due from assets they have leased out to customers, package them as digital assets. And normally, because the contracts are time bound, so for example, if it's an asset finance loan, it's time bound. Can it be securitized using a digital asset so that it's offered to an investor? And in that case, once it's done so, is that digital asset, can it be time bound? And are there any examples like that done globally?
So thank you for that question. From my understanding is yes, definitely, I believe anything can be tokenized or securitized. Yeah. So in this case, basically being asset-backed securities or collateral loan obligations, they can definitely, I think it can happen. In terms of examples, I'd have to real use cases, I'd have to do my research. But there's definitely that possibility for using that to unlock capital, securitizing like loan books, like you've given as an example, to unlock capital. For examples, I'd have to do my homework around that, but I'm definitely sure there's something. There's because on-chain, on-chain finance is it's building up, and the use cases are definitely there. But like I said, I'd have to do my homework, but I believe it's very possible to securitize a loan book or use the collateral from the companies to get loan. Yeah.
Allow me to chime in.
Yeah.
Irene, actually, that is happening. We have some DCPs who have branches outside of this country. I will not name names, but they're here. They're registered as digital credit providers, and also they're in other jurisdictions and markets where they are able to do that, such that now you can have the tokenization of your own loan book, as well as it comes with all its attendant assets. And then once you do that, you're able to unlock liquidity from the global market. So it is happening, but in the Kenyan space, as Robert said, I think I actually asked this question initially. There's a sort of a dichotomy within the law on how to go about it. That's why I asked Robert, are we really focusing the law on certain elements like art, commodities, and all that? And I think he invoked where you have a very wide breadth of interpretation of the law, such that even for a loan book, you can actually do tokenization of the same. So I do know for a fact that that is happening with our current DCPs within the Kenyan market. But now for the Kenyan law, they're waiting for regulation so that they can see how that actually pans out. So very, very, very possible.
So I've actually found an example of that. There's a company called Centrifuge that's a leading institutional grade platform for real world assets tokenization. And it has partnered with major traditional financial institutions like Janus Henderson to tokenize private credit, trade receivables, and SME loans. Centrifuge enables originators to unlock immediate capital while providing investors with transparent on-chain yields. With the protocol's total value locked is over $1 billion. So there are definitely examples of that. I'd advise you look at Centrifuge, as well as NZ Bank via Chainlink, which enables asset-backed on-chain finances. So there are examples for sure, and it's happening, but not in Kenya, mostly in the US. I'm seeing like four other examples of that. This Goldfinch, who have a cumulative on-chain origins of over $33 billion, and the yield is 8 to 12 for investors. So banks use these platforms to move illiquid loan portfolios off balance sheets while retaining servicing. So yeah, it's happening and it's very possible, to answer your question.
Thank you. I hope, Irene, that answers your question. Before we go to Abuko's question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. So we have, I don't know that, Robert, you can see Wabuko's question.
Because the real world asset has been tokenized and the value is pegged to the special purpose vehicle being traded in the blockchain, which makes it open to speculation. When the value of the special purpose vehicle goes down, does it affect the value of the real world asset? So like I said, the token for the tokenomics, it's the valuation of the real estate project. That's what basically values the value of the token. So you'd have a value account if it's gold or if it's a real estate. They would do a valuation report on the project, and so in the valuation report, that's where you get the price of the token. So it's valuation of the real estate itself, or the real world asset. That's what derives the value. And knowing real estate, if it's in a prime location, it's bound to go up because it's an appreciating asset. Yeah, of course there's speculation, but generally it's an appreciating asset. So the value is back to the real world asset, but the real estate itself, let's use real estate as an example. Excuse me, that's what is transferred to the real estate is transferred to the special purpose vehicle and the shares are traded. But the valuation report is done to establish the value of the shares of the real estate project, because the shares represent literally they represent the real estate project. Yeah.
All right. I don't think I see any other question. I think the rest is a commentary. Thank you so much, Chantal, for giving us more on Alpha Block, and of course, inviting to join the WhatsApp group as well. I don't think there's any other question, Robert, unless I think one of the key things that when we talk about virtual assets, when we think about it from a legal perspective, how to completely say to a startup, this is where exactly you start. Sometimes I find that we are too high up in the cloud in terms of how we communicate as legal people or other consultants who may be in a consortium for this. Maybe if I am a startup and I want to know that I have, my loan book and I want to start tokenizing, maybe you can just do a recap of where do I start? Where do I actually start? Of course, given the high level, because also legal services are paid for. Maybe you can tell us a little bit on a high level scale, looking at the opportunities
So yeah,
that the last act has brought in.
the opportunities, first of all, you have to see if there's really a point for it, because not everything requires tech or blockchain or even tokenization. It depends on the field and why do you want to be applying it. So in this case, if it's tokenization or for example, let's use Alpha Block. They're a real estate startup and I want to promote access to real estate investment. So that's the first point. Why? You just don't deploy this technology because it's the new and sexy thing out there, and there has to be a real vision or mission statement or a real problem you're solving that would involve the use of the technology, in this case real estate tokenization or real world asset tokenization. So one, there has to be a purpose, a mission, and a problem you're solving. Otherwise, if there's no problem, then will your solution really be adopted by the general public? Yeah. So that's one. If it's access to investments, I'd advise access to investment or lowering the entry barrier for investments for individuals. That would be a good reason for you to deploy or think about blockchain technology and tokenization. Two is the technology in itself. You'd find that maybe you're a founder, you aren't a techie. So do you know how to deploy, or do you have a team to deploy the technology? Because it's very capital intensive. That's why we aren't seeing a lot of such projects in this side of the Sahara, because lack of capital and such. Yeah, building out a real estate end-to-end or an end-to-end tokenization platform, from minting to banning the entire process, it can cost upwards up to 30 million, a functioning platform. And also you haven't talked about onboarding now real estate, onboarding investors generally. Yeah, that's another issue, because anyone can create a platform, but you need the investors for liquidity. So that's another thing you need to look at. Of course, there's legal. That's another expense you need to look at in terms of regulatory engagement, setting up the relevant policies, if it's customer consumer protection, if it's data protection policies, if it's KYC KYB policies, if it's AML policies. You need a competent legal team to work on that. Yeah, as well as you need a marketing team to market your tokens once fully approved by the relevant regulatory authority. So I'd say those are some of the things you definitely need to think about. And yeah, it's not a must that you deploy or you work on a project around tokenization if there's no use case for it, or there's no real problem you're solving around it, because it will be capital intensive, and I'm assuming very stressful. Yeah. So that's an overview. Yeah.
So you've spoken like a true innovator who has come up with, My Shamba and Sharia Online, telling
Exactly.
people don't invest your money where you cannot manage to see it through. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Unless there's any further question, I can't see anything on the chat session unless there's anybody who'd want to unmute themselves. And yes, to Kizito, this will be recorded. If there are people in this session who have not completely understood some of the jargon here, we hope to do a more better job next time to simplify it. But when we invite Robert again, I hope that he'll be willing and ready to come back again. So before
Of
we
course.
close, Robert, there's a question.
Yeah,
What
I've seen it. So this
yes.
will be in the regulations, yeah. Some of them have been provided in the act, but that's what we're waiting for the regulation. The regulations will provide for each license category what you need to present before the regulatory authority. But one is the directors of the company need to pass a fit and proper test. There's a whole list of policies, like I've mentioned them: data protection policy, ML policy, KYB policy, KYC policy, a whole list of policies. I think there are between 15 to 20 relevant policies for the companies applying. There's an application fee, of course, for applying. The core capital requirements that will be there for applying. You must meet a certain threshold. There's a fit and proper for the directors, whereby they must not have, encountered any criminal cases, certificate of good conduct, and the likes. So there's a whole list of requirements which will be in the regulations once they are made public. And I'd advise everyone to keep an eye out for that, as the National Treasury will be publishing the draft virtual asset service provider regulations for 2026, and also to participate in the public participation process and give their views around the regulations themselves, what they want removed or what they want added, for what they're feeling missing. So that's what I'd advise for that.
I think from everything you've said, I once looked at the act and I said it's not for startups, and I think I got bashed because all the requirements that you've mentioned, for anybody trying to come up with a company to do that, I think there's a lot of requirements, very heavy, and we've not even gotten to the capital elements, insurance, etc.
I agree with that. It's definitely not startup friendly, unless it's a matured startup, a startup that has been in the ecosystem and they have the relevant backers and the right team. Because also there's team requirements. You need to have, a proper compliance team, a proper CFO. There are those team requirements. So yeah, it's not for the campus guy or the techie guy who's there building in his, room or something. Yeah.
You might get bashed, Robert, by saying all that.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Very factual.
Yeah.
All right. No more questions from the chat. And as I said, any opportunity for anybody who'd want to unmute themselves rather than type, please proceed. Irene, I think you have a commentary as the chair of the virtual asset service providers. Do you have any sensitization workshops, webinars that are open to non-members?
Yeah, always keep an eye out for social media. But right now, our focus is mostly on regulatory engagements as we give feedback on the regulations. But yeah, once the regulations are public, there'll be online forums around the same, around the regulations and sensitization. Some of our members are actually doing it. The virtual asset chamber is quite doing that. Also, Madam, my senior Mudoni Njogu in forums such as this. So just keep an eye out on, there are a lot of forums happening around the same. And they're always open to everyone. Yeah, not only members, everyone.
Because as Robert says, the regulations are coming through, should be maybe in media or something, but the clarion call for all of us is to engage with the regulators when that notice for public participation comes out, so that we can also give our voice with regards to the same. I think it's also a responsibility to provide an enabling environment through, policy commentaries towards these regulations. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm hoping to do this again. Robert, please, you're most welcome. and then we can see how to progress this moving forward. Thank you so much and have yourselves a good afternoon.